Good morning, everyone. I hope you are all good on this November morning, and thank you for joining our webinar today. During this session, we will be covering quality management and how to enhance quality and trust in new builds by transforming quality control with digital processes. I'm Maria Hudson, and I'll be your moderator for today. And I'm fortunately joined today by Amy Wright, Operations Director at the New Homes Quality Board, who will talk about the work the NHQB is doing to oversee standards and quality of new homes, the customer journey and key expectations and processes. Thank you, Amy, for joining us. We're also joined by Harry Seal, who is part of our new business team at Zutec. Harry will be covering off some of the challenges we are seeing and hearing with quality from customers and talking through some of the benefits of digitising quality processes and sharing some hints and tips at the end and how to adopt solutions and what to put in place in terms of processes when moving through a digital transformation. Desmond Joy, our Head of Solutions here at Zutec, is also here to show some of our solutions. He'll be providing a demo and talking about the Zutec platform. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the session and we'll try and answer them as we go. You can put your questions in the Q&A board at the bottom of the right-hand screen or via the chat app. So please use that and we'll try and do that as we go, and we'll also do questions at the end. There will be a poll throughout the session, so please share your insight as well. This helps us really understand more about your needs so we can support you better. And again, that poll button is in the bottom right-hand side of the screen, so that will pop up when we go through them. So before we get into the crux of the session, I really wanted to talk a little bit more about Zutec. So for some of you on the call, you will know Zutec already. But we have been providing construction and property tech to customers primarily in the UK and Ireland for over 25 years. We provide a SaaS platform and common data environment for data management, supporting our customers through their digital transformation journeys with our solution families across document management, quality management, handover management, and asset management. This is across the REBA stages of the building life cycle. Today, we have over 400 customers. We're processing over 100 million quality data points and digitising over 65 billion worth of assets when managing quality. Our main focus is to support our customers with regulatory compliance, sustainability, and bringing efficiencies to their process. And this includes digitising paper-based processes, digitising building information pre-build, during and post-build, and enabling a robust audit trail of evidence to support proof of clients and evidencing work done. In terms of our work and the approach that we take, we like to build relationships and partnerships with our customers, who are the focal point of all the decisions we make and related to the delivery of product, solutions, service and experience. We have never wanted to spread ourselves too thinly as an organisation, so we very much focus on the residential sector, providing customisable solutions through our SaaS platform, with housebuilders being really at the heart of our business. You can see a collection of our housebuilder customers here who have been instrumental in playing a key part in the development of our solutions, such as Partel, so that we can support their working practices and overcome their pain points, particularly around regulatory compliance. We have a number of accreditations and awards that you can see here, including being an NHQB accredited supplier and also winning the Innovation Award in 2023 at the Construction Computing Awards for our work around Partel. So before I hand over to Harry, I'm just going to talk through quickly of some of the things we'll be covering today. So we'll be looking at some of the challenges of quality and the drivers to change, and Harry will be talking through that. Then we'll be picking up around the importance of quality, and Amy will come in here and discuss the work that she is doing with the NHQB. We'll then go into how to streamline quality processes, and then finally, how you can get to a single point of truth through one platform. I'll now hand over to Harry, who will talk about some of the challenges and what we're hearing from customers. Thank you, Harry.
Thanks, Maria. Next slide. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so just wanted to run through kind of some of the key sort of challenges that we hear with QM practices today. A lot of this from kind of the clients that we speak to, but also sort of we have multiple conversations with house builders kind of all the time. And I've picked sort of 8 of the key ones to sort of run through with you. So I'll run through those. So kind of first one is, a lot of what we see currently is that there's still a number of kind of manual paper-based processes, such as kind of plot books or clients having disparate systems. This is, something that we still kind of see in the industry. I believe it is kind of starting to change, but that's still kind of one of the key challenges, right? Manual, paper-based processes, or not having one kind of consistent sort of standard solution to deal with quality. Moving on to the next point, which is lack of standardization and consistency. We see all the time kind of house builders who approach quality on kind of a plot by plot, more commonly kind of a project by project basis. So you have different teams going out, sourcing different solutions for different projects, really kind of prevents having kind of any sort of form of consistency in the way that you approach quality. And there's obviously reasons why that isn't ideal. If you're looking to try and get a view of how your processes are working across an entire portfolio, actually make kind of some sense and sort of drive business decisions, strategic decisions out of the data that's being captured, a lot of that's lost, right, if you've got an inconsistent process. Lack of visibility for tracking of progress and activities, similar to the last point, right? If you are kind of viewing things on a sort of project by project basis, or you're working in paper, really, really hard to kind of keep track of, how sites are progressing and whether activities that need to be completed as part of the build are kind of happening on time. Where there isn't sort of a software solution in place to kind of deal with quality management processes, everything that we do is kind of prone to human error, and then ultimately kind of rework. If work's wrong or if they're incomplete, having kind of a structured, sort of standardized and consistent QM process will mitigate the risk of things going wrong, and then ultimately having to sort of go in and do rework. Next one I've got here is lack of reporting and audit trails for retrieving information later. This can be, highly kind of important, as things progress throughout a project, being able to go back, retrieve that information, understand who undertook kind of a QM process, who signed off, a certain stage of the build. It's really hard to retrieve this information if it isn't sort of captured and digitally and stored centrally. We see sort of inefficiencies across sort of multiple processes being time intensive. If site teams are constantly kind of reinventing the wheel on every project, going out and sourcing, a new sort of solution to deal with quality, looking at kind of a new way of working, different kind of form sets, a lot of time is lost by doing that. And there's a significant advantage to having something consistent and standardized. A really, really key one at the moment, if you look at things like Part L, without a sort of a software solution in place, it's really hard to sort of evidence and prove regulatory compliance. That's just a fact, right? There is a lot more actually evidence that's kind of needing to be captured throughout the build at the moment, and without kind of a robust process in place, it's hard to do that when we look at kind of the volume of data that needs to be captured. And also, one of the things we see is there's no sort of central control and data ownership. Again, partly feeds back to that kind of lack of standardization, but also kind of importantly, there needs to be kind of a central approach to this, and there needs to be ownership, right? There needs to be kind of senior stakeholders within businesses that sort of lead this from the front. So anyway, look, they're kind of the key challenges that we're seeing at the moment. Rebecca, I'm just going to move on to the next slide. So go back one if we can. Perfect. Next one. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. So I just wanted to kind of share some data, some stats that came out of a survey that we conducted back in September time. I think we had kind of in excess of sort of 50 respondents to this. I think the bulk of these, if not all of these, were actually not our clients, but house builders within the UK. And I just wanted to kind of pick out kind of a few sort of highlights from that survey. So 81%, perhaps unsurprisingly to those of you on the call, said that they were still having challenges with Part L. And over a third of those said that Part L was either somewhat or extremely challenging. 53% of those that we surveyed said that they'd kind of experienced a lack of adoption or acceptance from on-site teams This is really, really critical with any sort of QM process, and it's something that we'll touch on later in the webinar. But sort of bringing on-site teams on board with this process is absolutely critical to making a success of this. And then the last one here is that 44%, so almost half of the respondents stated that the old ways of doing things was working. Thanks, Marie.
Sorry, I'll unmute myself. So we're on to our first poll. And what are the challenges that you face with QM? So the poll should be put live now. You should be able to see it on the right-hand side. And if you can answer any that apply to you, that would be great, just to see some of your experiences and challenges with quality management today. So we're seeing answers coming in. Manual and paper-based processes seem to be one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing. Inefficiencies in process, human error and rework, lack of company-wide standardization and consistency. So really very much in line with what we've been hearing and seeing with our customers and some of the feedback we had with our survey. But manual and paper-based processes coming in top. So really kind of moving on to some of the drivers around digitisation, especially now that we've seen that, some of the biggest challenges are around manual and paper-based processes and inefficiencies. So the drivers to moving to digital processes, first and foremost, one being NHQB compliant for those registered house builders and developers in the UK. I'll let Amy talk a little bit more about that in some detail later, but that would be a big driver to streamline and manage process. Regulatory compliance is obviously another big factor that we're hearing and seeing from customers. Standards such as Part L or Regulation 38 and the Building Safety Act are really driving change. There are needs, particularly with the Building Safety Act, for evidence to be digital, and that's the same with Part L, with photographic evidence. So we're seeing a lot of our house builders customers move to a digital process to support that compliance. Obviously, ensuring you have the right processes in place to avoid rework. When quality checks are manual, paper-based, they are more prone to human error, as Harry was saying, and information can also be lost. So if you have a digital process and you have your information in one place, you can avoid some of that rework or manage it better. Additionally, this feeds nicely into having that visibility on site and from a management layer. When having one system and dashboard, you can have a single view across your QM, allowing users and teams to understand things like progress, what's happening on site, see issues and challenges when they come up, see when there needs to be work done or changes made so that can be resolved quickly, and also view things like approvals and rejections on quality checklists. So having that centralized view and really kind of acting quickly on things really improves trust, both internally and from a customer perspective. And finally, I expect many organizations are going through this digital transformation process as we speak. And having digital processes from a quality standpoint really does support that company-wide digital transformation initiatives to drive efficiencies across the business, give more structure across sites and teams, provide that audit trail of work, which Harry was also discussing, and ultimately give back control. So to talk a little bit more about that and what the NHQB are doing, I'd like to now hand over to Amy, who's, as I said, fortunate to have you on the call today. So thank you for joining us, Amy.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So just to talk a little bit about the New Homes Quality Board, it was developed over 4 or 5 years with key industry people. It builds on the existing consumer codes. So this code focuses mainly on quality and service. It fills gaps in the current arrangements in terms of the service. It is for private homes only, so we don't look at shared ownership, things like that. just because they have another ombudsman that protects them. And the principles are around treating customers fairly. So the NHQB have 10 guiding principles, and they range from fairness, openness, transparency, independence, just so that we can drive our developers having an open and transparent relationship with their customer. The code protects vulnerable customers, and vulnerable can be anything from a physical disability to a mental disability, or just the vulnerability that you feel when you're making the biggest purchase of your life, especially if you're a first-time buyer. So vulnerability can be so many different things. There's no high pressure selling techniques, and that's not to be confused with incentivizing sales. It's completely different to that. It's about restricting timescales for customers, or you must buy by 5 o'clock today, that kind of thing. So we've got things in place with our code of practice which reduces the high pressure selling. We ask all our developers to display our logos, just because we are not front facing to a customer. So we do heavily rely on our registered developers to promote the New Homes Quality Code and the Ombudsman. There is a 14-day cooling off period for customers. So just going back to the vulnerability section there, it means that this code requires developers to give a customer a couple of weeks thinking time about their purchase. Am I making the right decision? Can I afford this? Is this the right home for me? And if a customer decides against it after making that initial knee-jerk reaction of yes, let's get reserved, they have a 14-day cooling off period where they can expect a full refund from a developer. There's an information provision as well. So not only does the customer have to think about their mortgage payment, their council tax, their utility bills, we also ask developers to put together an affordability schedule, which essentially will show a customer what the home could cost you over the course of the next 10 years. So, for example, if a plot is rendered and manufacturer guidance on render states that after 5 years you might want to paint it, or you yourself after every winter might want to jet wash it, whatever the manufacturer guidance states should be a cost. Boiler servicing, the manufacturer states that a boiler should be serviced every year, so the developers will put in the affordability schedule what it might cost you to paint your render and what it might cost you to service your boiler, and what your management fees may look like for the next 10 years. There has been a recent code review, and for those developers that are on the call that are already registered with the NHQB, you'll be pleased to know from the code review that that's been reduced to 5 years rather than 10 years. And then there's the early bird incentive, which is a maximum of £150 with a customer having 24 hours to cancel. So there's a lot of things there that this code does differently to other codes to help customers make an informed decision about their purchase. As I said, the information that's provided at reservation, there's a full list of documents that the NHQC requires developers to show the customer and to explain to the customer. There's the 14-day cooling off period that I've just run through. There's a major changes clause. So if a customer has bought something and seen a particular specification on a working drawing or a technical drawing, and then throughout the course of the build, for some reason that drawing has had to change, so something is going to look different for a customer, there's a clause in there which encourages developers that they must have that conversation with that customer. This is what's changed. Are you still happy to proceed? I've already explained the affordability schedule, really helping customers understand what this home could cost them over the course of the next 10 years, soon to be 5 years. There's a pre-completion inspection. So as I said at the start, this code focuses heavily on quality. That shouldn't be confused with the warranty provider. Obviously, the warranty provider makes sure that developers are building the home as per building regulations. They have key stage inspections, etc. The pre-completion is a reassurance for a customer that before they take ownership of the home, they can have an accredited inspector do a full inspection of their home, following a specific checklist. There's also a rigid complaint structure. So every organisation will deal with complaints differently. However, a registered developer of the NHQB will have a timeline on how to deal with a complaint. It helps the customer to understand how they will be managed over the course of the next few weeks while their complaint is investigated. And then also this code is the only code that has the protection of the New Homes Ombudsman Service. So if a developer is unable to resolve a complaint for a customer satisfactorily, the customer has the protection to then escalate to the Ombudsman if they wish to do so. So the key changes in the after-sales service is that developers are required to deal with defects 30 days upon receipt of a defect. Obviously, the challenges of our industry will not stop because we have this requirement of 30 days. So, for example, a door may take 6 weeks lead time from delivery, from ordering to delivery. So where we can, developers are expected to deal with defects within 30 days. Where they're unable to do so because of materials or whatever other reason, they are expected to write to the customer to help them to understand, we've got your defect, this is what's happened, we're waiting until such and such of February for the door to be delivered. As soon as that's been delivered, we will be in touch to get that fitted. It leaves the customer knowing exactly what's happening with their defect. And then, as I touched on previously, the complaints procedure, it is very rigid in terms of the acknowledgement of the complaint must be within 5 days of receipt. There must be a path to resolution within 10 days, with a full closure within 30 days. And then if at day 56, the complaint has still not reached a resolution with customer and developer, the customer can escalate to the New Homes Ombudsman Service. So the New Homes Ombudsman Service is not only there to protect customers, it's also there to protect a developer, in that through the code requirements, both parties, developer and customer, know exactly what to expect. There's a sit down at reservation from a developer. This is what you can expect from us, Mr. Customer. And then, when it comes to certain build stages, certain key milestones within a customer's journey, the customer knows exactly what to expect. If for any reason a complaint is sent to the New Homes Ombudsman Service, they will first make sure that the customer has followed the correct complaints procedure through their developer. So they will not accept a complaint that hasn't gone through that previous timeline in terms of the 5-day, 10-day, 30-day, 56-day. They'll push the customer straight back to the developer. They will not accept anything for major defects. That is a warranty provider issue. The Ombudsman Service is there to adjudicate on complaints around the NHQC Code of Practice. So once the case is assessed and passed on to the Ombudsman for decision within 20 days, a draft decision is then issued, and developers will receive correspondence from the Ombudsman on whether the complaint has been upheld, partially upheld, or not upheld. And then for us, the Ombudsman drafts case studies. And these are really valuable to our developers because it helps our developers understand how the Ombudsman is approaching complaints, and, referencing them to the particular code requirement. And then the case studies help developers to understand why the Ombudsman has reached the outcome that they've reached. These are really valuable to our developers. And I think that's me. Am I handing back to you, Maria?
Yes, thank you, Amy. That was really insightful. I don't know if there is any questions. You can post them on the chat and question board, and we can potentially pick them up at the end, Amy, if there's a few that come through. But thank you for that. And I think probably hearing what you've said around kind of quality, not just during the build stage, but post kind of completion and at handover, it is a really important aspect to get it right from the start, really. So yeah. I think this kind of leads nicely into what Harry is going to be picking up next around kind of the digitisation of those quality processes to try and improve them from the start. So I'll hand over to you now, Harry.
Thanks, Maria. Just want to run through this next slide, which is kind of why digitisation matters. Reduces time, costs, and take control. So there's four kind of key pillars to this that we've identified, and then going to kind of move on to actually what this means in practice, what this allows you to do, and what this allows you to achieve. So the first reason is sort of structure and standardisation across processes. Complete data visibility across plots and projects. Some of that I kind of touched on previously, and the importance around that. Allowing kind of control over processes and how teams work. Again, going back to not having sort of teams going off and approaching these quality processes in different ways, ensuring that everything is kind of centralized. And then a key one at the moment is around compliance with regulation. So they're those kind of four key reasons as to why digitization matters. What does this mean? What does this kind of allow for? What does this sort of help you achieve? So build right first time, every time. So having kind of robust, structured quality processes in place will allow you to build right first time, every time, and kind of prevent or overcome or mitigate the risk of rework. It will allow you to deliver on time and drive project efficiency. Allow you to prove critical works and checks are undertaken with a clear audit trail, and then also have solid evidence that protects against future claims. I mentioned the survey, that we did previously. So this is a couple of other kind of statistics that came out of that same survey that we ran back in September. So the first one is that just over half, so 53% of the house builders that we surveyed said they are now ready to embrace digital technology. 66% of those said that they were looking for solutions for QA inspections, for Building Safety Act compliance, and Part L. And then a really key one, so 88% of those that we surveyed said that they want solutions that are easy to use. Again, that's critical. I know we've already talked around kind of the importance of user adoption, bringing sort of site teams on that journey. A key piece to that is having a solution that is easy to use. Hopefully that will be kind of apparent through the demonstration that Jez runs later in the day. But yeah, it's important that the teams on site have access to an easy solution that allows them to sort of do their job as efficiently as possible.
So we are now on our second poll question, which will pop up again in the right-hand side of your screen. And that poll question is, are you using digital process for quality management today? Do you have a digitized solution in place? And answers are yes, sometimes, but not always, no, or I don't know. So it'd be good to see your answers to that. So responses coming in. Some of you saying, yes, you do have a digital process for QM. Some of you saying actually sometimes, but not always. And we do have no as well. So that probably relates back to the first poll where we did see a few of you saying that you had paper-based and manual processes still in place. So it's pretty much equal between yes and sometimes, but not always. So thank you for your responses.
So, coming to the platform itself, based on our 25 years of experience and all the learnings that we have done, we have built a really flexible and a modular platform. So, the fundamental platform has got 5 key components, which is driven by primarily cloud, which is basically your the brain where we can actually configure all your business processes. So that's cloud. Field is where you try to get data harvested from your field or site offices. So this is where you can get your mobile devices to bring data into the cloud. We have got analytics, which is again feeding into looking at data on a granular level, so you can report on top of your data. The platform is flexible to be interoperable, so that's why we have got API access, and meaning we're able to export and import data on through our API basis and make sure that the interoperability part is checked off. And the last component on our technology platform is basically the BIM module. So basically, if you have got a 3D model and you want to link your objects to inspections or to data, so the BIM model pretty much sits in as a visual layer that sits on top of all those other elements I just discussed. So the platform itself is very flexible and configurable with the on the technology side. And the core building blocks are the workflows, that is basically a business process. The forms, basically trying to capture data from your field or on the cloud, checklist, and registers. So using these building blocks, we are able to literally build a number of solutions. So that's what you're seeing here on the screen. So with a flexible platform, we are able to digitize construction processes, and we have 4 key solution families that we have offered to our customers. So document management, which covers basically everything related to documents, approvals, looking at site diaries. Quality management, which we'll be covering in more detail today. Handover management is pretty much our Reverse stage 5 and 6, where you are in the process of getting all the built information handed over to the end client or to the operations phase. And lastly, the asset management solution families, which pretty much looks at everything in the operations phase of a building in terms of document management, in terms of compliance for your audits, in terms of risk assessments, or in terms of anything that the regulatory bodies have asked for, example, the cladding remediation. So in today's demo, I will be focusing on the quality management side of things and specifically on the fire barriers, because this is our new solution that we have launched into the market. So the fundamentals here being, during the construction process, how do you ensure that your fire barriers are inspected and are quality checked and make sure that it's signed off? So I'm going to get through the demo and show you that. So just give me a second to set up my screen. 1 second. Let me start sharing my screen. Share my screen. Share this. So what I've got here is basically an inspection form on the field app. I'm just trying to share my iPad screen as well. Just give me a second. So that's happening. It's coming through. And there you go. I'll make it a bit more bigger so everyone can actually see this. Yeah. Perfect. So what I have here is on the platform side of things, I said we have got field, cloud, and analytics. So that's the key things that we will be demonstrating today. And what you're seeing here on my screen is basically an offline tool on my iPad. And I have got an inspection form for 5 barriers. So assuming I'm one of the site managers who's responsible to be filling in an inspection or trying to do an inspection, how do I go about this? So in the legacy era, we were trying to capture all of this on paper-based forms, but with this digitization, we are able to have a really streamlined approach. So I go into my 5 barrier inspection. The templates are all set up, as Harry mentioned earlier. We have got a standardized approach of capturing this data. So I can go and click on this add inspection icon, and that brings me a 5 barrier inspection form to start with. So I can fill in relevant details on my form, which I'm capturing information from the site. I can select floors, I can select unit numbers that I'm inspecting. And suppose I'm inspecting a barrier type that is a fire door, as an example, and penetration type is door frames. I could also do something interesting here. I could go down to this pin drop location and tag for room 205. I can bring that fire door as a location that I inspected. So what I'm doing is filling in a form, dropping in some locations to make sure that the inspection is validated. And then comes the interesting part wherein I can literally go in, add comments as needed. I can take a simple photograph to prove it, right? That I did my inspection. And as soon as I take my photograph, the key thing that you have to notice here is it brings my GPS coordinates in. It also brings me a date and timestamp. I can add as many number of photographs as I need. And there is one additional functionality that I would like to emphasize. That is, I can literally go into the photograph and mark up the photographs as needed. Meaning, I can do commentary on the photographs and make sure that is added as part of the inspection. So far we have finished the form. We have dropped a pin, we have taken a photograph, and then I can go into a signature block. And as I'm doing my inspection, I can also validate the inspection by setting a simple signature by my pin sign. So what's happened here is, rather than you filling a form manually or taking photographs on your phone and trying to sync them all, everything is done on an offline basis, and you can continue doing this inspection on your device. Now, the one thing that I didn't mention here is, once I finish my inspection, I have the ability to set a workflow stage as well. Me being an admin here, I see pretty much everything. But if it's an inspector, he can say that he went to that particular plot or unit, and then he set the status as inspected. So he also has the ability to even accept or reject it and have a custom workflow requiring to your business process. So once I save this, that information is now part of my record, and all I need to do is sync that, and that will go back into the cloud. And what happens then is the interesting part. All the data that's going out from my device is now coming into my cloud, wherein I'll be able to see a really nice dashboard of all the information that is collated from my app. And then all of that comes into a dashboard that looks something like this. And again, dashboards are completely configurable and customizable on our site. So we can say what happened on a particular floor or what happened on a particular development. So you are able to, just give me a second. I probably page loaded this. Give me a sec. Let me just load that up again. It's in my e-analytics and then fire barriers. Yeah. Hide this out. So I can go down to a block, which I inspected. I can go down to a floor, I'd say probably level 0. I can go down to a unit number on the inspection, and then you'll be able to understand for that particular floor, there were 48 inspections in total, and across the workflow, what percentage of it is inspected, what percentage of it is approved. It's not just about capturing the data, it's also about understanding what's the quantum of inspection that's gone through, what's rejected, and what's been finally signed off. This is really important when it comes to due diligence and when you're handing over this information as your handover dossier or as part of your Rest 38 requirements to prove that you have actually done your QA checks and everything is in order as it should be. So what I demonstrated to you is just a form where you're capturing data from the field, all the data coming back into cloud, and you're able to report on top of it. Now, using the same method, we have a number of other forms or a number of other processes that we can digitize on the platform. I'll actually take you through a few samples now. So let's get into probably the inspections, your build stage inspections. So on my left-hand side, I'm looking at our standard templates for QA housing check sheets. So we have got 21 best practice check sheets that we have digitized and that we offer as a default to our customers. And if I'm looking at that data coming through, so I can report on top of how many check sheets do I have, how many have been reviewed, how many is in progress. So that's what you're actually seeing here on my screen. Across those 21 check sheets, how many are scheduled, how many is in progress, how many have been rejected, what's completed and verified. So you're able to get a bird's eye view of your inspection regime and make sure that your build stage quality process is completely controlled and managed. And this can be, again, you can filter it by who inspected it and who reviewed it. We have got a number of filters to get the data through. And we can also report on a wall chart style reporting, wherein our construction crews normally love this. So if you're looking at individual units, and if you're looking at the check sheets across the top, you're able to understand what's actually done. So green is pretty much completed, purple is verified, gray not yet started. So you're able to understand holistically of what's actually happening on your inspection regime. So we have got a number of views for the same data. Because Zutec is a data-driven system, we're able to report on top of every single data point that we have got. So understanding your 21 check sheets and how they have actually progressed is really important. Which site manager has actually started working on it? And what is the status of each of those check sheets? You're able to get a bird's eye view. And snags, again, Amy mentioned about the importance of snagging. So this is snagging during construction, and we can also do snagging during the operations phase as well. So this is basically identifying during the build stage what snagging has actually happened and what was the average closure duration of these snags, which is important again to understand how long has a snag actually been stayed open and what are the key culprits of the snags and the snag categories and classifications of what's actually happened. So this is just a sample of the sales demo on the quality side of things. I'll actually show you one more sample, and this is basically for the NHQB compliance. So this requires documentation. This is something that we always say that doing the due diligence before you get to the homeowner or trying to sell your property is always good. So we have mechanisms to actually look at the inspections for NHQB, specific checks, and then we can report on top of how many houses do we have, how many inspections have been completed, what plot documents have been uploaded, what is in percentage of incomplete works on a low rise and on a high rise. So we have a variety of ways of representing the data using the same technology, underlying technology platform as it stands. So again, documentation, pre-completion inspections, incomplete works. Again, the breadth of digitization that we can go through is vast. So I can only cover so much during our webinar here. I would recommend the team here who's listening to this webinar to arrange a demo session with us so we can actually go into more details and to understand how we can help you in your digital transformation journey. So coming out of the demo, can we go back to the presentation there, Rebecca, if that's all right? Yeah, perfect. Perfect. So one of the key elements we say is for anyone leaving pen and paper, how do you go about your journey of getting yourself into a digital platform? How do you get your adoption going? So you always say start small. And then we say once you have the learning experience, and then you start expanding and then rolling it out to a wider solution pieces. So what you're seeing here on the screen is what our typical house builders have done in the past and which has worked. That means number of our house builder customers have initially started with partial photographic evidence, where they set up a simple form, they set the data capture mechanisms, they set up the right stakeholders, and they had a top-down approach where the business stakeholders supported the digital transformation, and then we had buying from the sites. And we started that, and then once they have adopted and started using the technology, the learning curve is pretty much done. Because we're using the same underlying technology, then our customers can go into QA forms or fire barriers or health and safety forms or snag and defects management. And that way, you're not imposing a heavy learning curve on our construction teams who literally want to just get with their day, right? So we want to minimize the load that you're putting on the teams. So start small and then expand into other areas that you want to digitize. And then the journey is launch into a simple solution, adopt and branch out into your construction process, and then look at full breadth of document management or CD as stage 3. So that's our journey in 3 stages. So if there is any further questions, feel free to drop it in the chat, or feel free to have a conversation with us and book in a session. Thanks, guys. I'll just pass on to Harry now.
Thanks, Jez. Appreciate that. So I'm going to go on to, in a moment, talk about kind of some top tips around kind of implementing a QM solution into your businesses. But what I wanted to kind of do before that was just kind of a couple of tips on one topic specifically, actually, which is a really, really key one that's been mentioned as a theme throughout this webinar a couple of times. And it's how to sort of ensure user adoption. So really important to invest in that onboarding. And by that, I mean kind of investing time and resource into that. So as a business, it can be, or we have seen examples of in the past, house builders will go out and they will go and buy a piece of software to fix a problem and just assume that piece of software is going to fix that problem on its own, right? There's a lot more that goes to it than that. And it's really important that as a business, if you are, going out of your way to bring something in to solve a problem that you have, that you invest in that onboarding process. Critical to that is nominating go-to super users. Typically between kind of 1 and 3, depending on sort of the scale of the business we're talking about. But it's important, and obviously if you were hypothetically working with Zutec as part of that sort of training and onboarding process, we would ensure that there are people in your business that are technically proficient and trained to a level where they can operate as super users within your business. But it's really, really critical you've got those people that understand the platform and the value of it and the problem that it can solve. At a kind of a fairly technical level. Education and solution. So solution software is one piece, and training on that piece of software is important. But also actually education around the problem that you're trying to solve as well is really, really critical. If you looked at Part L as an example, yes, there are softwares out there that can help sort of tackle that challenge of capturing photographic evidence, but to kind of better ensure user adoption, it's better to kind of take those that are going to be involved in the processes, site managers, site teams on that journey, right? Educate them around why this has to happen, the importance of it, the regulation behind it. Mandatory training, we think is really, really key. So, and also with that, important just to train the users on the piece that they need to do. Jez, for example, in that demo there, showed you both the field app, but also though that kind of sort of high-level reporting capabilities on the cloud system. If, for example, site managers, if their job, which is typical, is going to be going out and capturing that evidence on site, let's focus on ensuring that they are trained on that element of the process. Important to produce, and again, Zutec can always kind of support with this and have done this with a number of clients, but important to have some guidance documentation in place as well that teams can refer to. And then we've touched on super users already, but it's really important to have that kind of ongoing super user support within your business. Next slide.
Thank you, Harry. So we're on to our third poll, and that is, are you using different solutions, tools, or quality management today? Simple answers to that, yes, no, or I don't know. So that poll is now live. If you can put your answers in. And I can see that, yes, most of you are using multiple solutions to manage quality. Some are saying no. So yes, there's an assortment of different answers in terms of how quality is managed on site and at management level today. So thank you for your answers. I'll now hand back to you, Harry, to run through our kind of final tips.
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, as mentioned, so I just wanted to run through some kind of top tips really for if you are in the process or looking to begin kind of implementing a quality management solution within your business, these are some top tips that we've learned, having gone through this process a number of times now with multiple house builders in the UK. So some really kind of key tips as to how you can sort of best go about this to ensure success. So the first one is to start small. Jez touched on this already, right, in terms of that sort of implementation and how you scale this up within a business. But it's important to focus on meaningful but manageable change. Often you're going to be aiming this at users that are starting from a fairly low digital base, right? So if your status quo is paper forms, Excel reports, for example, and information shared via email, that's a fairly low base to start from, right? So you don't want to kind of overwhelm teams within the business. As we've touched on already, user adoption, that's going to be your biggest challenge. Initial change, so that first piece will involve more work, but if you get that right, if you get that established, if you get teams bought in, any subsequent processes that you roll out will be far quicker and far smoother in terms of transition. If we're looking at starting small but meaningful, focus on must-haves, right? So Part L has been the really key one in the last few years. So either kind of must-haves or things that are going to be kind of the highest impact processes. Defect management, for example, is another one that can have kind of a really quick, meaningful, impactful kind of change to the business. It's always kind of easier to get users on board, taking that approach. And then don't try and change too many processes at once, right? I think we've kind of touched on that already. But unless you have a significant IT team that can manage kind of a major change project holistically, including things like training and change management and user support, it's really, really key not to change too many processes at once, or you overwhelm a kind of a site team. Our kind of sweet spot would be 1 to 2 processes. So a Part L and a snagging, as an example, as a start, get those embedded, get those working, and then you can look to change other processes from there. The next one is around devices. So actually consider what devices your teams are going to be using on site. So the first point on that would be, so both support and actually fixing issues is a lot easier if everybody uses the same device. There's pros and cons to kind of tablets and phones. Zutec, as an example, works on both, and there's pros and cons. So if you've got a tablet, it's going to be easier to use, for some of those digital forms, capturing that evidence on site. If you're looking at viewing a drawing, for example, a tablet has a bigger screen, so that's going to be easier. Downside to the tablet potentially is that the users have to remember to take them onto site, right? But lanyards actually can help with this. We found that quite effective. The phone is going to be trickier to use. It's a smaller screen. It's as simple as that. But flip side of that is it's more convenient. Site operatives, site managers, 99% of the time they're going to have that phone. They're going to have that phone with them when they're on site. We support both Android and Apple. We do find Apple iOS devices are easier to support. The reason being is that there is only one version. Whereas if you look at Android, it can be more difficult as it runs multiple versions. So you can end up in a position where different users will actually be seeing differences in the UX and the UI of the app. And then last kind of point on devices is sort of avoid shadow IT, as we would call it. So site operatives using their own devices. We found that it's kind of likely that you'll run into sort of data transfer issues sort of later down the line. Next slide, please. Consider site connectivity. Fairly sort of straightforward, but Wi-Fi enabled sites will make life a lot easier. It's possible to solve this without it for simple processes. Our app, will work offline, and then you can sync when you get back into an area where you do have Wi-Fi, but it can present a barrier to sort of wider, larger scale digitization going forward and actually scaling that up. The next one is around sort of investing in support infrastructure. So I think I mentioned this a moment ago, but any platform will need sort of ongoing management. Vendors such as us, we can offer kind of support, especially sort of during that initial sort of onboarding and implementation phase and kind of early adoption. But there needs to be a medium strategy that there must be kind of expertise in-house. So that goes back to the point we were mentioning earlier around sort of having super users within the business. A couple of points to consider. So project setup, user management is a really key one. Most businesses will have levers and joiners. It's important to be sort of on top of that process. Top up training, so not just sort of training once during that initial enablement phase and then leaving it for 6 to 12 months. There needs to be first line issue resolution and kind of proper structured management of any process changes. There's a need for a dedicated resource to realize the efficiency benefits of technology, essentially. Eternal PR battle with sort of non-digital native users. Often that is kind of site operatives. There needs to be speed to resolve these issues. That's key. And supporting case for sort of internal people. It doesn't need to be an IT professional in order to kind of play that role, but they do need sort of have some kind of form of familiarity with kind of admin systems beyond that sort of standard business use. Communication is really, really key. Next slide, if we can. So it's important to sort of tell that story of what we're doing and why. So this doesn't just come across as kind of another management initiative that's adding to their workflow. I touched on this a moment ago, but around telling that story of if it was Partel as an example, why are we doing this? Why it's critical to the business? Why you need to sort of get on board with this? We then need to kind of communicate how they actually use the tool, right? So again, it goes through that kind of training and ongoing training process. Important to look at kind of multimedia. Obviously people like to learn in different ways. So try to sort of vary this and provide a number of routes to kind of accessing information. So documentation, video, running kind of in-person sessions. I think where possible, aim to be everywhere, aim to be kind of as present as you can. Look at easy access, make it as easy as you can for teams, right? So, where do site teams go for kind of procedures and policies? We've had examples that have worked really, really well, where certain house builders will have, big QR codes set up in their sort of site offices, for example, point the phone at the QR code and straight away they're kind of took through to some guidance on sort of how to use the solution, and then also kind of consider the messenger as well, right? So this needs to be kind of a top-down approach, and then build internal champions. That's always going to help you to sort of scale something and kind of ensure user adoption. Particularly important sort of during sort of early adoption to sort of pick that piece up and pick those kind of champions with a mix of kind of capabilities for a potential trial. We found that often what's happening in reality is that you might need to kind of focus on some of your younger team members who are perhaps a bit kind of more digitally adept to kind of play those sort of champion role and bring sort of others on board on that journey. Number 6 is senior ownership is a key success factor. So it's important that adoption is treated as a must. Site operatives ultimately need to be held accountable for using these tools and these processes for this to work. It's highly likely that at some point during this process, you're going to face some resistance from the site team. So to maximize the value of the platform itself and the solution that you're bringing in, there needs to be kind of a senior voice that owns this, who can cut through that noise. Also important to kind of balance that approach, right? Part carrot and part stick. You need to do everything that you can as a business on sort of the carrot side to ensure that the communication is where it should be, and place sort of value on the importance of that and ensure that there's a robust sort of training strategy in place to build confidence with those that are going to have to be going and using the solution. But also there needs to be kind of an element of stick as well, right? It needs to be kind of made clear that there is sort of accountability there. This digital adoption is now considered a key part, of their performance. Next slide, if we can, for the last couple. So managing a template centrally, site teams are not best placed to set up a data model ultimately. So don't get site teams to go off and set up their own projects. That in most cases we find will go wrong. Really, really key to have one master template for ease of administration and to support sort of automated reporting with tools. that have that capability. Again, I've touched on this a few times, but we want to ensure that there is structure and standardization there. And then make sure that you sort of take feedback and change requests, but consider any sort of changes quite carefully before you do so. You need to think about the bigger picture rather than perhaps just solving, a quite specific change that needs to happen that relates only to one site. Kind of beware and be thoughtful and be mindful of the impact that might have on sort of the wider sort of strategy and what you're ultimately trying to achieve. And then the last one is around, once you've gained that momentum, think about the bigger picture. Ultimately, any manual process can be digitized. Start to think about where you have paper forms in the business, right? Is that your QA forms? How's your snagging done? Health and safety, kind of a key part of any business. How are these things done currently, right? Are these in paper? Again, where do you have Excel trackers or reports? How are you tracking sort of progress on sites? How are you looking at plot management? Where do you have email workflows? Snagging and non-conformance reports, as an example. All of these things can be digitized, and ultimately, the potential time and cost saving is huge, right? If there's an example that we have from a client of ours, they were spending 50 million a year on defects. What they were able to do is they were able to analyze that actually there was three categories of issues accounted for 50% of that, right? So 25 million per annum. They were able to identify that, really, really clear then in terms of where you need to focus your efforts and where you need to kind of improve those processes. And I think the last kind of couple of bits to consider, or the last one to consider really, is that I think this requirement for data, this requirement for doing things digitally is only going to grow, right? If we look at things like building safety, if we look at things like sustainability, where we're looking to achieve kind of increased productivity, there's only going to be more of a drive as we go forward around sort of digital and around that requirement for data. So it's really kind of important now to start educating and upgrading your teams to deal with that change, or ultimately there is a risk of your business kind of being left behind.
Thank you, Harry. So I'm just conscious of time and taking a few quick questions. So I'll bring us to a close, but really wanted to kind of wrap up saying, what we can bring to the table. I think you've heard a lot today in terms of platform and what we can do in terms of configurability so that we can scale with your business. We are a company that has unrivaled service in terms of being an extension to your team. We're here to help you scope, define, implement, train, get users adopted, monitor, and then for support and communication throughout the process. And lastly, knowledge. With our 25 years experience, we have an unrivaled understanding of the market as well, and we're experts in the sector and have a strong track record. I will now hand over to questions, as everybody's happy to stay on for just a couple of more minutes. There is a couple of questions that come in. I have a few for you, Amy. So shall I start, if you're happy to take these? And that first question is, if we haven't registered as a NHQB developer yet, what's kind of the quickest process to get up and running?
My email address.
Yes.
Yeah, so I can get my email address to you, and we can arrange a Teams conversation where I can talk you through the process and what's required. It is really easy. It's really simple. And to be honest, a lot of developers are already doing the requirements that are needed to activate. So yeah, I'd welcome a conversation.
Brilliant, thank you. And I know you talked about case studies as well. Have you had any kind of key learnings, or have you improved process based off the fact that you've been able to see kind of how it's been working with the developers and house builders? Have they helped?
I think the most important key learning is that the Ombudsman is not just completely focused on the customer. They are very neutral in terms of adjudicating. So I think, developers can be reassured that as long as they've followed the code requirements, the Ombudsman are very neutral in terms of their outcomes. The protection is there for the developers as well as the customer.
Great, thank you, Amy. And then one for you, Jez, that's come in around kind of digitisation of forms. You showed some of the forms during the demo. If a house builder or developer has their own forms, is that something that we can digitise easily and align with different house builders' internal processes? Sorry, Jez, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. So absolutely. So we normally, when the customers on board with us, we actually give customers an implementation pack which contains our standard set of questions, and customers would then review it and then make tweaks, or they would adjust, or they would say, "We have our own forms. We want to digitize it." So that's absolutely possible during the enablement phase. So all you have to share with us is what forms do you have got, who is going to be using it, what is the workflow that you need, and then what are the type of reporting and the KPIs that you would need from those forms. So we would help you in digitizing those forms in a timeline that suits you, and then get this up and running. Yeah.
Brilliant. And also, obviously, implementation is a big thing when rolling out a new solution, Jez. Is there kind of timeline around how long it takes to get a solution up and running?
So when it comes to standard implementations, our vendor answer would be 6 to 8 weeks. And again, it depends upon the complexity of the business process that is needed. So sometimes the customers might have some bespoke requirements saying, when I'm doing my check, I need the check to create issues on the background of this. And those checks needs to be assigned to a different workflow. So at that time, those nuances might increase the time required. So normally within 8 to 10 weeks, we are on a mean of trying to set it up and get it up and running. So that's what we normally say.
Great, thank you, Jez. And I guess you talked about kind of the digitising own forms. I assume that we can customise dashboards for house builders as well.
Of course. So we have an embedded Power BI on our platform. That's what we use for analytics. So any data that you capture using Zutec, you can report on top of it. So using Power BI dashboards, customization is possible. You can define what KPIs you want to track in your business, and then we can set that up for you.
Great. If anyone has any other questions as well, please feel free to put them on the question board or chat board. There's one question for you, Harry, which I think you could probably answer. And if a house builder or developer is working with subcontractors, which they largely are on site, do they have to purchase additional solutions or licenses? How does that work?
No, they wouldn't. So I guess that would be kind of counterproductive in a sense, right? If in order for this process to work, everybody kind of needs, or everybody that plays a role within that project or the successful delivery of that project would need to be able to access that solution in order for it to be a success. So no, absolutely not. Any house builder that goes in and kind of procures a solution from Zutec as part of the licensing agreement, any sort of subcontractors, consultants, for example, where relevant, would be able to use that solution as well as part of that licensing agreement.
Thank you, Harry. And maybe another one for you as well. Is it possible to extract data from the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, the clients that we work with own that data. The data is theirs. So that can be kind of extracted at any time in a number of formats. Excel, you can extract that via PDF, so reports, for example. Often, if we looked at Part L, there's a requirement to, extract that data to pass on to a SAP assessor, for example, at quite regular intervals, and then also, if, for example, at the end of a contract term where we've worked with a client, might be kind of a 3-year period. If one of our clients decides that they want to go and do something else. All of that data that they've captured throughout that period can be extracted because the data is ultimately owned by the client and it's kind of serviced up via our platform.
Perfect. Thank you, Harry. We don't have any more questions that have come through. If you do ever have questions, feel free to reach out to one of us on the call today, the team, or you can email us at info@zutec.com, or as Amy said, if there's more information you want on the NHQB, please email her and we can provide details afterwards. I would like to thank Amy for joining the call today and running through the details on the NHQB. So thank you, Amy, for being part of the session. It's been great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. It's been great. And then thank you to Jez and Harry as well for being part of the call. And also thank you to all of you for joining